There comes a time in every Dungeon Master's journey when they ask the question, how should I challenge my players? The DM's Guide says each encounter is an opportunity to make the character's situation more complex and urgent with more significant consequences, which gives the impression of a rising action leading in a straight line right to the climax. While following this roadmap though, the natural tendency is to make every combat optimally challenging, but the best stories don't look like this. I've heard hundreds of times and said it myself, if a combat doesn't matter to the story, you might as well skip it. And I still believe that. But there's a technique introduced in a recent discussion between two legends of the game, Matthew Mercer and Brennan Lee Mulligan, that has changed the way I think about combat difficulty, and my games are better for it. My name is Sam, I'm a Dungeon Master and former teacher, and in this video, we're going to explore a tool that goes against your natural instincts as a Dungeon Master, but will make your story stronger and more impactful than ever before. This is Tabletop University. For the past few years, I've always taken pride in the quality of my encounters, and I honestly think it's one of my strongest features as a DM. They're dynamic, they include opportunities for player interaction and choice, and they're very challenging. But that doesn't always mean that they have the impact I expect when I build them. And this conversation explains why.
There's a concept that Akira Kurosawa talks about, and is in actually I think is in a lot of Miyazaki movies as well, called Ma, which is
Yes.
I love Ma. It's an incredible thing where there's a sequence before the final battle in Seven Samurai of rain falling on the village as the action has been building and building and building, and then we get here and then it suddenly stops. Why?
Take a quiet beat and live in the world and feel it breathe and remind yourself that the stakes don't matter unless you are reminded what you're fighting for.
Literally what Kurosawa said. He said, you've just seen 3 or 4 battles in the village at this point. This is going to be the most violent climactic one. This is the final battle. If I don't let you watch the rain fall on this peaceful village, how will you know what violence is?
Brennan brings up the Japanese concept of ma, which roughly translates to a negative space or an intentional gap in a piece of art. His and Kurosawa's point is that the instinct to always optimize, to keep excitement going at all times, is, as Brennan says, soulless. If you do anything over and over and over and over again, it will get boring. The DM's Guide says that a mix of low and moderate difficulty encounters early in the adventure can lead to a climactic high difficulty fight. Brennan argues that the strength of a story doesn't come from a climax, but by the ma, the space around it.
I used to nanny this very sweet little boy, and he's running in a circle around the entire playground with his arm fully extended like this. He's got a fist out, just running. I was like, hey, bud, are you being a knight? Is this your lance here? And he went, no, I'm punching. he goes, and I went, oh, why are you punching like this? And he went, this is the part of the punch that hurts the most. Now that logic rules.
It's pretty great.
But it is a child's logic. It is literally not being cognizant that all of the strength of a punch comes from the wind-up. All of the horror of the battle comes from the rain. You have to have the thing build up and then release.
When telling a story, the build-up, the context is everything. If the biggest moments in your games have nothing to compare them to, they don't land as hard as they could. Countless examples in stories utilize this technique to make their climaxes stick that landing. The quiet village in Seven Samurai, the silence before the detonation in Oppenheimer, the standoff before any duel from a Sergio Leone spaghetti western. If you have a favorite example of Ma, share it with the class down below.
Well, for the movie to be exciting, everything's got to be exciting, right?
Maintain momentum, keep it going forward.
Maintain momentum.
We've had these conversations with our animated series, and it's been a fight and many hard-won moments to allow those moments of Ma.
Obviously, Ma is applicable to narrative moments, and you should use this in your games to make those moments of violence stand out. But the concept of Ma, highlighting a gap in the story, doesn't have to stop there. Ma can also be applied to combat encounters themselves. Just as the narrative moments of Ma bring the combative moments into perspective, the Ma of an easier, less challenging combat gives you extremely valuable context for what makes a difficult one. It's the juxtaposition of these encounters that makes the ones they barely survive way more powerful. So if you know you're planning a difficult encounter down the road, adding a low intensity one before is key to making the challenge feel like something special. The easy fight is the rain on the village. And this is one of your greatest tools as a DM.
I think about Matt Colville, who's an incredible resource for
Yes.
DMing advice, who talked about how the DM's number one superpower is their control over the flow of time, which is like an editor.
You are completely guiding that pace, and if you're not aware of controlling that, sometimes it can get away from you.
One way you can influence the flow of time in your game is with a quick, easy encounter. I recently interviewed Keith Amon. He's the author of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and we discussed how he uses this technique.
I was constantly tweaking the level of challenge to suit my opinion of, I think there should be an easy encounter here. I think there should be a moderate encounter here or a deadly encounter here.
Yeah, I guess at that point, you're kind of using challenge rating as more of a pacing mechanism of like,
That's precisely what I do. I do that with my own stuff. I do that with published adventures. But I think a lot of other DMs might think, well, it's written there, so that's the way I got to play it.
I did think that the first time I started playing and quickly realized
Don't
you
see
can't.
why that should be the case at all. I'm running this. This is my show.
Pacing is a huge part of what shifts a fun session or campaign into one that drags or feels rushed. And as Keith mentions, knowing when to cut scenes isn't the only way to put your thumb on the scale. On the flip side of what the story needs though, it can also be about what the players need, and the difficulty of a combat is a major element here. Before we dive into the 3 types of combats your players need and when to use them, I want to introduce you to the first official sponsor for the channel, Harpy. Harpy is a tabletop role-playing platform designed to support every game, no matter how you prefer to play. It's free to use and works as a virtual tabletop, theater of the mind, and even asynchronous play-by-post. It also doubles as a campaign manager that works really well, and everything you build in Harpy belongs to you 100%. You can export everything to a standard open source format so you're not locked into the platform. Harpy is built by a solo developer who actively listens to his community, so the features that get added are just requested by community members in their Discord, which is honestly an amazing way to develop a product. It's system agnostic, so you can customize character sheets to run D&D, Pathfinder, Blades in the Dark, or any other system you're into. And my favorite feature is that it's compatible with desktop and mobile simultaneously, which even includes the virtual tabletop. Harpy is set up with 16 languages with more on the way, and they do have a $10 per month tier for a couple bonus features, but if you just ask, they'll give you 50% off, which is awesome. If this sounds cool to you and you want to check it out, you'll also be supporting me by using my link down below. Now, back to the video. So how difficult should a combat be? The short answer, it all depends on the purpose of the combat. Before you ever design a combat, you have to decide for yourself and for your party, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? This can be broken down into 3 distinct objectives. First is what many people believe to be the best type of encounter, and it's usually what I always aim for. It's the optimal challenge, one that is difficult but still doable, and may require some creative thinking. This instinct actually comes from my roots in the education system. There's a concept in education psychology called the zone of proximal development by Lev Vygotsky. This zone basically says students learn most efficiently when the challenge is within their capabilities, but just on the edge to where it does require them to think critically. Keith Amon and I discussed this zone as well.
Students learn best when they are assigned tasks that they can complete, but that they have to work to complete.
Yep, I remember that from Ed Psych.
As a DM, you don't want to kill your players, but you don't want to give them unsatisfying victories either. You want to give them victories that they have to work for. The greater the struggle, the more satisfying the success.
In my experience in the classroom and at the D&D table, this rings true, and combat is no different. But the pitfall here is that when you get good at designing encounters like this, you get addicted to it because they are truly so fun. But if you do anything long enough, even the feeling of we barely made it out alive can get repetitive and boring. That's where the other 2 types come in. Our next big type is where the purpose of a combat is to show the players that the world is dangerous, and that their actions have consequences, and that death is a reality and it can come for us all at any moment. The tricky part here is that this is much easier to pull off at earlier levels. But as the game progresses and the player characters gain increasingly powerful abilities, this becomes really difficult to do.
I almost exclusively play games that have 6 PCs. The idea of anything ever being overpowered, you know that sequence in Disney's Hercules when Hades is just putting all the little monster tokens on the table and it just cuts to Hercules absolutely dominating and he's like, ah! That's just me every season of Dimension 20.
Okay.
I need to overturn the entire monster manual to even like slow you guys down.
With how powerful players have gotten in the recent 5.5 edition of D&D, it is nearly impossible to properly challenge a team of 5 or 6 players. No matter how you stack up the numbers or the challenge rating, at the end of the day, you have 1 brain and they have 6. So feel free to throw the kitchen sink at them here and trust that they will probably get through it at higher levels. And if they don't, be ready to communicate with them when their best solution may just be to run. The third and most underused encounter difficulty is the easy encounter, the Maw. This is the one type I've fought hard to avoid for years, but of which I'm finally coming around to seeing its value.
I see your value now.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
The Maw encounter can still serve the story itself though. I started adding them in my game specifically in 2 instances. When I know a really difficult fight is on the way, it makes those deadly encounters stick out even more in the minds of my players and myself. On the other hand, maybe your players have had a rough go of things recently. Maybe they lost a beloved NPC or even had a PC death, and they need to feel like heroes again. This is especially impactful when you reuse an enemy type that they encountered at a lower level. They get to see how much they progressed and that they are not just a punching bag for you to abuse for an entire campaign. The concept of Maw allows for less optimally difficult encounters to still have a space in the story. No matter what level of combat you end up settling on as far as difficulty, you can always make a combat more engaging by adding different story elements to it, different interactive things that your players or the enemies can actually use. I made a whole video about this and even a combat menu of little things you can add to any combat to make it more interesting. The Maw encounter can work even when you don't mean for it to be one. When a player thinks of a creative outside-the-box idea that would make what was supposed to be a challenging encounter easy, let it. Don't be so focused on making every encounter difficult and challenging that you ignore opportunities for that Maw moment. These are the Maw that will have the greatest impact because it doesn't feel like the GM or DM decided it should be there. It's the decision of the players that opens and highlights that gap in the story. Sometimes it's good for the heroes to decide they want something, go in and just take it. This will make those hard-earned achievements, when the gap between desire and success is further more difficult or more indirect, it makes them feel more earned because we have these other Maw arcs to compare them to. Pacing is and has always been about variety, and if every encounter and desire to success pathway feels the same, anything can be boring. When the time comes for a Maw encounter, there should still be a story objective at stake, but it may just be easy to achieve, and that's okay.
Sorry I called you Michael Douglas, and I see your value now.
Well, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Varying difficulty in your encounters is a tool you can use to improve the pacing of your session, your campaign, and your story as a whole. And at the end of the day, that story is all that matters. This has been Tabletop University. I've been Sam. Be sure to subscribe, check out my other videos, or join the Patreon if you want to support the channel. A special thank you to our sponsor Harpy, to our patrons for your support, and thank you for watching.